human beings are prone to listen to the ego. And when you get to, when the ego gets the best of you, then you're looking from a lens of oftentimes antagonizing, othering, greed, arrogance. But when you look at it from a moral and ethical perspective, it's a message of beauty and humility and kindness.
Welcome to Happiness for Humanity. I'm Rania Badreldin, the Happiness Consultant from Egypt. Join me and my guests for an hour of meaningful conversations for a happier world. Today, I'm joined by Amira Abou-Taleb. Amira is my best friend and a fellow and instructor at the University of Helsinki, Faculty of Theology. Amira, I'm really happy to have you here. Well, one, because you're my best friend and I just love having conversations with you. And then this conversation is going to be recorded on a podcast. So I can't wait. Thank you for being here. And please tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted that you invited me here. It's always nice to talk to you. And now it's nice to talk to you and whoever else is going to be seeing this. So whoever's watching, thank you very much for watching this. I hope you find it beneficial and useful in some ways. Like you said, my name is Amira Abou-Taleb. I'm Egyptian. I am currently in Helsinki, talking to you from Finland, where I'm at the University of Helsinki, and eager to come home soon, inshallah.
Inshallah. So tell us, what have you been doing there these last few years? What has been the focus of your work?
Well, I came here 4 years ago to start and complete my doctoral studies. And I'm at the Faculty of Theology, and my dissertation is in Islamic studies. And I particularly focus on Quranic ethics, and particularly the concept of Ihsan. It's an Arabic word. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a direct translation in English, but it combines and fuses the meanings of beauty and goodness combined. And when I say beauty, I mean beauty in a holistic sense. So it's aesthetics, but also it's ethics and moral beauty. And it's a form of almost aiming for perfection. So goodness can be goodness in terms of good deeds and good acts, but it's also goodness in the forms of a skill set, doing something well. So I was really intrigued by this concept. And when I was looking into it, I realized that there's really no academic study that examines and investigates this concept in the Quran in a holistic and like methodical manner. So that's what I did for my PhD, which I recently completed. And it was a journey of joy, really.
Wonderful. So actually, in light of a lot of what we hear about Islam, to be researching beauty and goodness and ethics in the Quran is, well, number one, that's a beautiful thing to be doing. And I'm sure that there were findings that you came upon. So I would love to hear a bit about that, because whatever the religion is, really, I mean, it saddens me that religions are often, number one, misinterpreted, or number two, things are done in the name of religion that have nothing to do with the religion. And number three, they tend to bring people apart and bring out sometimes the worst in people, even though I think their aim is to bring out the best in each one of us and to have us all sort of come together, you know. So there's a lot of beauty in religions. So can you tell us a little bit about what you found in the Quran in terms of Ihsan? So you're saying Ihsan as a word encompasses both beauty and goodness?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what did you find?
So let me start by saying that the Quran repeatedly speaks of the message as a continuation of previous messages. So that this is something that has encompassed, previous prophets and messengers that we know of, and many, many, many others. that we don't know their names. So in reality, it encompasses, if you look at like all the major world religions, you'll find that the ethical call is the same. And many people, unfortunately, regard, whether they are like Muslims or non-Muslims, understand or perceive the Quran to be a book of law. And this is not accurate. In fact, the Quran has over 6,000 verses based on different estimates, like the highest that you can find in terms of verses that have or carry legal ramifications is maximum 10%. Some even argue it's 3 to 5%, depending on how you interpret the verses. So this is first and foremost very important. The Quran describes itself as a book of guidance. It is a message of morality and ethics. And I believe that, you know, all major religions are the same, aim for the same thing. So it's sad, like you said, to see that not be the focus of the religious discourse. That's number one. But I think just like anything else, it's the best of you, then you're looking from a lens of oftentimes antagonizing, othering, greed, arrogance. But when you look at it from a moral and ethical perspective, it's a message of beauty and humility and kindness. So I really enjoyed the fact that I was able to focus on this and to have a fellowship that funded me for the past 4 years to focus on that. And the concept, or Arabic is a Semitic language, so most words are based on a root, gizr in Arabic. And the gizr of ihsan, you know, the concept of husn or hasan, and often it has many different morphological patterns such as ihsan or muhsin or hasan, or these all carry that fused meaning of beauty and goodness. And the Quran repeats that root 194 times. Yet there is no study that really analyzes it. Having said that, though, I must say that within Muslim societies across the globe, whether they're Arabic speaking or non-Arabic speaking, the notion of ihsan or the concept of ihsan is highly internalized. And that's because there's a very famous hadith known as Hadith Jibreel, in which the Prophet ﷺ describes ihsan as being the highest level of religiosity. It's as if being in the presence of God. So this is where it's derived from, this idea of the very high meaning of ihsan, plus the combined names and the attributes, the divine attributes, which in Arabic is known as Asma'ullah al-Husna. That's husna means the ultimate beauty and goodness. So this was intriguing for me, and I embarked on the study to analyze it. So what became clear to me after the first 2 years of investigation was that the Quran presents an entire paradigm based on ihsan, an entire moral paradigm. And if you allow me, I'll explain what that paradigm is briefly.
Please.
It's based on a few key principles or key tenets, and they're all derived from the Quran itself. So my investigation is a textual analysis using what is called tafsir al-Quran bil-Quran, so looking at the Quran to explain itself. So, of course, I have utmost respect for all the different tafsirs that exist and all different interpretations, but this was really sticking to the Quran itself. So from within the Quran, the Quran describes God as being the ultimate beauty and goodness. So this is the highest, obviously, ideal. But then there are verses, and I'll give you just an example of the verses here, because for every example that I give you, there's other verses that we won't have time to get into. But then some verses in the Quran speak of creation as being endowed with beauty and goodness. So here, all of creation, including the creation of the human being. The difference is, though, that the Quran constantly asks the audience to reflect and to ponder and to contemplate nature, to be able to discern and recognize God. So God is found in the majesty and the splendor and the meticulous, harmonious cycle that you see in the universe. And it's a lesson for human beings as well, how everything prospers and everything perishes. And there is this cycle, how there's the cycle of the sun and the moon, of the night and the day. And the Quran speaks of nature from the largest of, the celestial spheres to the tiniest seed, that is hidden inside the earth. And these are all supposed to be markers and messages for those people who can contemplate and who can reflect, to realize that we're all bound together by one, that there is this sense of universal harmony, that there's beauty and goodness that's abound out there in nature, and that the role of the believer is to try to put forth this ihsan, to put forth beauty and goodness. So in the Quran, there's a clear mandate that human beings are not only expected, believing human beings, to uphold justice, which is in Arabic al-adl, but also to even go above that and to put forth ihsan. So inna Allah ya'muru bil-adl wal-ihsan in Surah Al-Nahl, verse 90. So there's a clear mandate not to stop at justice, definitely not to marginalize justice, because to aim for beauty and goodness of ihsan, justice has to be served. You can't be transgressive yet claim to be spreading beauty and goodness. But it's a hierarchy in a way. So the Quran has very clear verses that mandate believing human beings to reciprocate. Ahsan kama ahsan Allahu ilayk, like put forth beauty and goodness, because that has been endowed into us. And then the rest of that one verse, وَلَا تَبْغِ الْفَسَادَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. So the ihsan is the antithesis of fasad, which is corruption, transgression, injustice. That's why as human beings, regardless of your creed or religion or lack thereof, we're all deeply saddened by injustice. How we define injustice, of course, depends on our understanding of the situation and our context. But we have an innate sense of what justice is. And based on my readings, also, we have an innate sense of what ihsan is, of what beauty and goodness is. And it's not only one thing, it's a very relative thing. So in any context, at any time, there's this sense of mandate that the human being thinks about what would be beautiful and good in this moment. It's not a standard formula. So just as the Quran then, makes it a mandate and command for believing human beings to put forth ihsan to offset the injustice in this world, the Quran also speaks of ihsan being the criteria of judgment. The Quran speaks of a final judgment, and that people will be assessed on the amount of ihsan that they've put out into the world. And then one thing I find absolutely beautiful is in Surah Al-Rahman, verse 60, where there's a rhetorical question of هل جزاء الإحسان إلا الإحسان? Like, can the reward for ihsan be anything but ihsan? Of course, some people understand this as the ultimate reward, in the afterlife, but also it's open for interpretation. Some people understand it as that there's going to be, like, when you put out beauty and goodness into the world, people treat you the same way most of the time, or you get that in return. Some would even go as far as arguing that the mere fact of intentionally putting out beauty and goodness makes you feel good, regardless of what comes after. So this whole cycle is what I'm calling the ihsan paradigm in the Quran. And this is something that I was just able to identify by using a very methodical, systematic approach of plotting all the references to the root in the Quran, analyzing the themes that they are present in, and just taking a picture and looking at it conceptually. So I think ihsan is a very, very important concept, and that it would serve human beings well to be more cognizant of it.
Absolutely. I mean, the way you describe it, if we were all doing that, I think we would be living in a world that looks very different from the world
Yes.
that we see now. And so we seem to be very far removed from that. And I think part of the reason is, I mean, I don't hear a lot of people speaking about the Quran the way you do. I mean, that, and why? I don't know why. I mean, there seems to have then been a focus on specific aspects of the Quran, and some of them misinterpreted, rather than the focus on beauty and goodness and ethics. So is part of it the problem of whatever the religion is? Part of it the problem of what's being put out there by certain people about that religion that's dividing people, or maybe making people just want to, you know, not be a part of this because it doesn't make sense to them, or because it, you know, it doesn't appear to be contemporary or whatever. So I mean, this is a different kind of conversation, but I think it's important to identify where we are in terms of religion, because it is now something that's very felt in our lives. People are doing things in the name of religion that aren't just whatever the religion is. I don't want to speak about something specific necessarily. We can, but in general, I mean, this has been the case as long as I've been alive. I've seen misinterpretation of religion. I've seen people arguing about religion. And to me, it's supposed to be something that brings out the beauty inside us, because there's beauty inside each one of us. And it's supposed to be something, if we're going to believe in it at all, then at least then we use it as a way to develop ourselves and develop the ability to see the beauty and goodness in others, and then to come together, you know, as one with that beauty and goodness, right? That's, so for me, it's just very obvious, and I feel I'm able to do that. I don't feel it's a difficult thing to do. For some people, though, it's obviously a struggle to see past your religion, and then maybe your religion in that sense is more of rigid rules, or you've been taught that way, or something really like dogma, or something that's not helping you see either the beauty inside you or the beauty in other people who are perceived to be different from you. So can we just talk about that for a minute?
Of course, that's something that's very complex, and I would never claim that I have, you know, the answers to all of that, but we could definitely reflect upon it together. First of all, I feel like, again, because of the human ego, religion has been one of the most exploited tools throughout mankind, throughout humankind. It's an appeal almost, because there's a sense of beauty in that, though, because it appeals, it banks on the idea that people have faith, and that they want that yearning to the divine. But then there's sometimes an intermediary that exploits it and tells them, okay, for you to get this, then you have to do that. And sometimes it's taken out of context. Sometimes it's good from good. It's meant to have good intentions, but over time it develops and takes on different meanings. One thing that I can say, from a historical perspective, the Islamic intellectual, you know, tradition has focused often on fiqh and jurisprudence, which seems like a lot of legalities, but that was a mandate of practicality. You know, when Islam started 1400 years ago, it was in a tiny little desert spot, and it had soon spread, you know, within a few decades after, to cover what was then the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Sassanid Empire. So you're going into lands that have people who have a very different background, who have no Arabic, who come from different traditions. So it was important to be able to run an empire, to have things that make an empire. So, you know, Arabic became the official language. They created a monetary system, a postal system, and laws and rules and regulations. So the basis of this notion of fiqh started then, but then it continued taking off as if this is the most important part of the religion. And this doesn't mean that fiqh is removed from ethics. As a matter of fact, it's meant to serve what is called as maqasid al-sharia, or the principles, you know, the driving principles of it. And these are all based on important moral values. But what happened is that over time, oftentimes the rules that were set into place maybe 1,000 years ago were just simply replicated without being aware that the time has changed, that the same rule doesn't apply anymore, that you have to invest the same amount of thinking and goodwill and good intentions and hard and dedicated scholarship that those jurists had done back then. Not simply take, their final fatwa, for example, and apply it today. I always look at it as if when we were in school, we were taught algebra, and if we are learning about an equation that says A plus B equals C, okay, and we were told that C is 14, well, C might not be 14 if A and B are not those numbers that they are now. It's a formula. So oftentimes I see what happened in the field of fiqh is that we took the 14, and no matter what we see, we say, oh, it has to be 14. It doesn't have to be 14. It has to be whatever. We have to apply the methodology. But that's only a tiny part of the problem. I think a bigger part of the problem is that the historical context, the going into quote unquote, the decline of the Islamic civilization, going into the dark ages, not the Western dark ages that are known, in history books today, but dark ages where the power of thought declined. And then we get into the colonial period and, all of the ramifications of injustice that happened there. But I think that having said all of that, I think that people still have a lot of beauty inside of them, but oftentimes we're just simply misguided. You and me might have the privilege of having grown up with families that have focused on, morals and ethics, and maybe also other types of privileges in terms of critical thinking and education, or maybe economic. I mean, all of these things play into how vulnerable you are and what you listen to. And so I do see the world being in a very difficult place with all the injustice that we see around us, not only in Palestine, but in Sudan, in Congo, in different parts of the world. And this is mass scale injustice. But there are small injustices that happened around us on the street every day, from huge, horrific crimes, obviously, that happen on the mass scale, to even the simplest of misdemeanors. Like for me, somebody who's throwing trash on my street is an injustice to me. And this is no way, I'm not saying, it's just a huge spectrum of transgression. And we are witnessing transgressions on all ends, some that are just incredibly difficult to even fathom, and I pray for those people every day, and some that are just very mundane, that happen every day in our streets and in our lives, and we've just find it difficult to deal with them. And although I feel like it's necessary, because I do believe that every human being has that light inside of them. It's just the way that life has served them and the way that they are able to think through the problems that they have, and the appeal to authority. Who is the authority? Is it their heart and their mind, or is it someone who's telling them that you're going to go to hell if you don't do exactly as I say? And I think this is something that has happened in religions in general, is this fear-based approach. That's, so what you end up, exercising in terms of religion is out of fear that if you don't do this, then there will be tremendous punishment. But in reality, when you read the Quran, it's a very love-based approach. I'm not saying that there's no fear. Obviously, there's, very clear and strict punishment for those who transgress. But the whole message is a message against injustice and against transgression. And the focus of the verses is always on those who do well, who do right, who are upright, who are just, who are kind, who are humble, who do ihsan. But that kind of rhetoric is not mainstream, and this is a problem. Even though I must say that it is mainstream in the Sufi tradition,
Yes.
but the Sufi tradition has itself been marginalized from mainstream Islam, arguing that, they use symbolism and esoteric references. Esoteric just means like not what you see on the surface, like a deeper meaning. that people can agree to or not agree to. But the beauty of this Ihsan paradigm is that this is what the text says. It's very clear. It's not anything that is symbolic or hidden meaning. It's a very clear, of course, it might have many layers of hidden meaning, of course, but at the very surface level, it's a call to put forth beauty and goodness.
And you're saying this is an ethical call that's across all religions. I mean, so
in different ways, because I can't claim that I have studied, other religions, but the moral, I have some of my dearest friends, and we all share the same values. I grew up in, it was common in Egypt to have private schools. I was a Catholic school. Yes, we were given, Islamic religion in terms of religion class, but in terms of the ethos and, the nuns, it was all just values and morals that were standard across religions, which is mostly based on upholding justice and being kind.
But this is not something we often hear about. So I think we need more voices like yours to maybe come together and amplify these messages that really unify us all towards something that's beautiful. And as a matter of fact, well, it's not a matter of fact. It's a point I want to ask, this is what I believe anyway, that if we look at the main messages in any of the religions, even somebody who's not at all religious or who doesn't necessarily believe in any of the religions would probably agree to those messages, because there are things related to fairness and justice and beauty that the average person would probably want to apply to their lives, even if they aren't already. They're not going to be like vehemently against the idea. So actually, if we take the most important parts of any or all religion, it's just about coexisting, fairly and peacefully with one another, right? I mean, is that true?
I would totally agree with you. I can't claim that I know, what truth is. I could argue that I know what my thoughts are and what I believe, is closer to the truth. But yeah, I always see it as like a vertical and a horizontal relationship, like our relationship with God, or a lack of relationship. This is a vertical, a very personal thing that's between me and the divine, between God, between Allah, between, in other religions, it's whatever the word for God is. This is a very vertical relationship, and other people, I don't personally think should, be involved in that or meddle in it. But really, the guide and the measure is the horizontal relationship of what I derive from that relationship or lack of relationship, and how it impacts the way I am present here in this universe. Present meaning my relationship with those around me, both friend and foe. I mean, it's also very important to see how we deal with who we perceive as, the enemy, not just be nice to our friends and the opposite, to the enemy. I'm not saying that we should accept injustice, of course. We always have to, argue and try to maintain justice. But even with that, like there are verses in the Quran, in the conflict context, where there is a command for ahsinu, that even then there's a way to also be cognizant of this element of ihsan. But it's not only limited to our relationship with other human beings, it's our relationship with everything on this universe. It's with the animals, it's with the plants, and with the trees, and first and foremost with ourselves. Are we showing, beauty and justice to ourselves? Are we able to take our mindset out of this, fear-based, I'm not talking fear-based from a religious perspective now. I'm talking about this capitalist approach of looking at the world through a lens of scarcity, that there isn't enough for all of us. So I have to, like this greed idea that I have to,
grab whatever you can.
Exactly. That I have enough, even if it's at the cost of other people not finding any resources. And that's a very capitalist approach where it's, it just serves to keep the economic cycle going. And But then the opposite of it is like a love-based approach where there's abundance, that resources are enough, and that we are the more, and putting out ihsan is almost like putting out, love. It increases when you put it out. It's very different than, a monetary system where, the more you spend, the less you have. When it comes to issues of ihsan and beauty and goodness and love and kindness, the more you spend, the more you have, and the more you circulate it in the society. And you believe that there are enough resources and abundance for all of us, and you care about all of us as if we are all one part of this greater whole. So it's a whole different paradigm that's not very prevalent in the world today. But I feel like there are societies that still see that, the societies that still cherish the human connection, where we, there's a sense of, sisterhood and brotherhood, and with people on the street, that people can still help each other and pray for each other's good. I think this is very important as a key factor of a success of a society, regardless of their economic state.
Yeah, you also said something important when I was talking about the truth, and you said you can't claim to know the truth. It just made me realize now when you were speaking as well, I think part of the problem is that when we believe certain things to be true, and they're presented to us in a way that shakes us, or that we feel that there's a gross injustice, we then find it very difficult to accept another human being who doesn't see the same truth. So then this, I think, creates a lot of animosity. So you have people yelling at each other in the streets, or even shooting each other because they think that person has a different belief system. That's actually probably the most dangerous aspect of allowing other people to basically play with our minds and decide for us what is true and what is not, rather than us finding that truth inside us. And I think maybe hearing enough of opposing even perspectives, but enough of them to formulate our own. I'm just trying to, what I want to do is try to figure out how can we get out of this rut, this mess that we're in terms of relationships with each other, even just with our neighbors and people in the same street or in the same neighborhood, and also then relationships as well as nations. And as people in those nations, we just have a lot of conflict happening. I want to sort of figure out, okay, how can we start to see one another, not necessarily as the evil person who doesn't believe in my truth, but as somebody, a human being who has formed their own interpretation of what the truth is, and that's where they are right now, and kind of meet people where they are so that we can have hope of moving forward. I think through dialogue, probably through proper communication, like effective communication and education, so that we can start to see each other differently, and maybe start to see through a lot of the propaganda that we are often fed, a lot of the lies that we hear. But I think the idea of being seeing only one side as well, or only listening to a particular group, might also be limiting. I think if we expand our horizons to, as much as we can, listen to a variety of different opinions, we will be able to figure it out, on our own. This is what I've been trying to do anyway. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I think that there's many layers, obviously, of how to kind of try to dissect that. I think on one end, there's the mental, the mind, employing the mind. Like when you see a situation where there's a clear conflict, and this is generally for maybe even bigger situations, like a world crisis, for example. I feel like one has to do the intellectual effort to try to understand the context, right? To understand the historical sequence that led to this conflict, knowing very well that history is written by human beings. So you have to be able to also look at different sources and to be aware that when you're reading sources that are all coming from the same reference, then there might be an inherent bias. And I never mean that it's ill-intentioned, although sometimes with propaganda, it's clearly ill-intentioned. So I feel like for those who can afford, the intellectual feat, they must engage. We often get caught up in the emotions, but we have to, and of course, for those who can afford, I don't mean financially afford, but to have the mental, preparedness to delve into the historical sources and to understand and all of that. But even on a lesser scale, if it's a smaller scale type of an issue, then try to hear both sides. Because oftentimes what's stemming, it's the problem itself just keeps getting conflated and convoluted. And then each side, it kind of snowballs until it becomes a huge, kind of deadlock. But sometimes if you try to go back to the original issue, it might be easier to resolve. But you also have to realize that, if it's not something that's affecting, obviously, the public, say it's a personal situation and you have an encounter where you felt that you were treated in a way that was not right or that wasn't nice, then you have to also realize that there's a context, a personal context for the other person that you're not privy to. And maybe keep that in mind. Definitely not accept injustice or accept that type of treatment, but maybe it's just to be able to stay away, try to help guide. And I often feel here when we invoke, the heart and just pray for the people who hurt other people have been hurt themselves. And this is important for us to be aware of, so we don't keep continuing the cycle of pain and hurt where we try to uphold, justice, but not in a way that would be in any way add further transgression. And this is a very delicate matter. As a matter of fact, one of the most important messages that I've gotten from reading the Quran many times over the course of my studies is the fact of this moral implication that every human being is implicated morally almost at every point of the day, to take sense of accountability of what you do and what you say and how you're thinking. And I feel like if we reclaim that sense of accountability to our thoughts and to our actions and to our speech, this would get us closer to this area where we live a life of, abundance and subscribe to that love-based paradigm. Because oftentimes we don't want to go through the moral effort. It's easier to follow someone else who says this is right and this is wrong. But with every situation, there is a level of moral agency that a human being has. Even if I just say good morning to you in the morning, like how I say that good morning, and if I choose to say good morning or not, and all of these are little things that if we engage with, we can help kind of train ourselves to be, to try to elevate on a moral and ethical plane. But it's very hard because you can't keep thinking about all of that every day. But you can, when you're faced with a conundrum, to realize that this is a moral issue, moral problem, moral conundrum, and not immediately go take the easy way out of saying, oh, they already looked at it and they said this, so I have to follow them. But to actually stop and pause and think and do it from a place of goodwill and good intentions. And at the end of the day, fight for justice and pray for the transgressor. I think it's very important that we have to be aware of that. These people, whoever they are, whether they're personal relationships or global politics, we need to be firm and stand for what is right and fight for justice. But you also need to pray for the transgressors to to have that, you know, light shine brighter inside them.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of looking at it. I think so many people, I mean, I even struggle to, I talk about that, and this is what I try to do, but sometimes I don't feel like I want to pray for that. I just want to remove them from their office completely, and just like, I'll pray for you. And I really would pray for you, but just go away, be somewhere, yeah, not in this position of power. And
because
I pray
their presence, that's a problem. When it's someone like that in a position of power,
yeah, that's the problem.
Then the reach of the harm that they do is just so much bigger and greater, and causes so much more harm. And keep in mind that I'm speaking from a place of like the ideal. Of course, we can't do that. Of course, we'll get angry and we'll just want to go and find a way to alleviate this anger. And I mean, but that's again the moral predicament. Like, when you're in that situation, do you act immediately, or do you restrain yourself and say, I'm going to give myself a half hour before I even respond, and just allow yourself to reflect?
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I don't know what we can do now in terms of the people in power, because I think it's become quite obvious to many people anyway, that we have people in power who are completely ego-driven and who are just, in like fight
Those
mode.
who seek power tend to be ego-driven, right?
Yeah, I guess so. So then the
they
entire
are probably
system
more prone than anyone else to, unfortunately use this power. I'm not saying everybody who seeks power is ego-driven, but I think it's there's a clear correlation there.
I mean, you could seek power to want to, make a true difference. You could seek power to want to change what's happening with people in power.
And there are people like that.
But there are, I think the systems don't even allow for people like that to come into power. A lot of the systems.
Yeah, because the systems, unfortunately, have lent themselves very much to this kind of fear-based approach. And one way of always augmenting or bolstering the sense of self is by othering the other, by saying, I'm better because you're bad, and so this will always be there. And no matter how much beauty and goodness and kindness and reserve we put out there, the world will always have good and evil. I mean, this is just the way the world is. And I think I've learned that from you when you once told me, and it became kind of a motto for life for me, is that, you basically do what is right with integrity and without attachment to the results. So what you do is you just keep putting that message of justice and beauty and goodness out there. And you try not only to put it out in terms of words, but in terms of application. We look at our own context. Are we really living with those, ideals, with those values inside our homes? Are we treating all our children equally? Are we treating, those we work for or who work for us fairly and kindly and with beauty and with justice? We have to really, talk the talk and walk the walk if we want to make a difference. We can't be oblivious to the issues that we have internally. And once you do that, and once you continue, I think, spreading out that message, some change may happen. Yeah. Hopefully we'll see change happen. And I do feel like the world is shifting in a way. But that's not going to be your marker. That's not how you evaluate, the way you live. You live the way you live, and the way you think is the right and proper way to live, that allows you to live with dignity and with integrity and with hope, and just let the rest of the things unfold.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I know you're absolutely right. It's maybe just gets harder if you are witnessing things on a daily basis that you don't want to accept them, and you don't think it's right to accept them because they're unjust. So then it's harder to not be attached to the outcome. But that is true, that what we need to do, what we do, share, messages, help people spread voices without being attached to the outcome, because we're not going to necessarily see the outcome we want and as fast as we want. But I think
you pray for the outcome, you hope for the outcome, you do everything you possibly can to reach that outcome, but you realize that it's not, you don't control 100% of what happens. You control maybe a bit of what happens, and to that bit, you do your best. But it's a very messy situation, you know, whether you're talking on a big scale or a small scale, it's complicated, it's not easy. And it's it requires constant dedication and thinking and reflection, and you know, slips and you know, you feel like you're doing a good job and then you slump and you go through, you know, some harder times or darker times, but then you regain and you go up. And that's why I'm saying this notion of ihsan is very relative, not only between one person and the next, based on their own context and, you know, everything that they're bringing to the table, but between a person and themselves. You know, I might be able to show, you know, some beauty and goodness in my interactions today, but tomorrow I might be in a very difficult situation and be unable to do that. And sometimes the most I could do in beauty, in terms of putting forth ihsan, is to not do. Because I know if I say something, it might be hurtful. So not to say it in that case would be. And then the context is always how you read the context. Like if you're walking down the street, you know, and I come and I push you, you know, and you fall, that's clearly transgressive and wrong. But if you realize that I did that because you were going to be hit by a bus, then it's a whole different context, right? So it's very hard to just take standard, you know, ideas. But the idea of justice, again, based on, you know, being informed of what the situation is looking like. And sometimes it's very hard to have different perspectives, even though it's amazing how we have different perspectives still, right? Like we see so much torture and pain, and yet the perspectives are clearly very different. So in that case, you really have to like hold up this humanitarian call for like no child should suffer for any adults doing, you know, and go back and read in the historical context to understand how we got here. Do your best to spread that awareness and pray for a better outcome. But it's very difficult, it's hard, and it's okay also to be hurt and to, you know, to feel the pain and to kind of lean into that. Sometimes there, you know, we're human beings. It's
we need to feel. I mean, actually,
be okay, because we're so programmed that as soon as I don't feel good, that it's like I have to do something, excuse me, to alleviate that feeling, and that leads to, you know, all forms of addiction and all of that. But and this is again is a very hard thing, is to lean into that feeling of discomfort, to say, okay, that I'm not feeling good now, but give yourself a test and say, tomorrow, you know, at this same hour, how am I going to feel? And kind of wait and see and put an alarm. Do you feel exactly the same way? I mean, did you manage to feel a little bit better? Everything is transient. So even when we're in a dark place, we should have faith that it's not going to continue being dark all the time.
Yeah, you're right. And sometimes I think, when you were talking about how even when we have unimaginable atrocities taking place and there are still different viewpoints, I sometimes have been feeling lately that like it's almost like we're in kindergarten or something, and people are arguing about who started it or who did what, or who.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's a certain that we need to agree after a certain point that there are some things that no matter what, we cannot justify. We just can't. It's not about who did what first or who said what first, and all of this pointing fingers thing. Just stop right now what's happening, because as humanity, this is what we need to do to respect all of humanity. And then we can sit on a table and we can argue, and we can, you guys can use all your egos for as much as you want. But like you said, innocent children and women and men, because I think sometimes I obviously feel for women and children because most of my life has been working to help, women and children here in Egypt. But also the men, because, when we don't say the men,
Absolutely.
it's almost as though the men, that they're that's okay. No, they're also innocent men. So I don't care what nationality somebody is, where they're from. I don't care about any of that. I do care that as sort of collective humanity, we can agree that we will not allow and do not want to see any of us innocent people subjected to daily atrocities, and that's it. And that no matter what politicians say, it doesn't matter right now. What matters is that that's not allowed, not on our watch, and then that's it. Then we stop that first, and then they can figure out if they're going to be able to solve their little politician problems. This is kind of how I see it. But I do agree with you that there are different things we can do, but one of them is to just start on a personal level with ourselves, and then to just extend that to our immediate family and our friends and our circles. And then as much as we can to be the voice for people whose voices aren't heard. Yeah, we just need to do our best, unattached to the outcome, and not just hope, but actually be a part of the change that we hope to see.
We hope to see. I totally agree with you, and I do agree very much with this idea of being a childish, ridiculous, nonsensical game. And I think that maybe there's also a sense of disillusionment. Like when we were younger, we thought those in control, the world mechanisms are looking out for our best interest, and that even if I don't feel like I have it right, there are bigger and better entities out there in power that are ensuring that the world is a safe and fair place. But I think what we are realizing is that this is not necessarily hold, and this is not necessarily the situation. And so what do you do with that? And that's why I'm saying we have to start with our own community, with our own sense of self, with the people around us. Try to be, while amplifying, of course, and, spreading and sharing the strife of those who are exposed to so much atrocities and injustice. But even on a local level as well, if you see people being treated unfairly, speak up. That's, I think, something that we all have to start taking into a sense of responsibility. Even I said on the littlest level, like if you're going to throw trash in my street, that's a shared street. We shouldn't be doing that. We should, of course, there's mechanisms of how trash is removed, and this is a very tiny, tiny, tiny issue compared to obviously other things. But I'm just trying to make the point that we could try within our own communities to at least make this world closer to what we think it should be, and what fits with our innate aptitude. Like there's a concept in the Quran of fitra, that we have this innate sense of beauty and justice and goodness within us. So we feel good when we hear pleasant things, when we see beautiful things, when we see fairness. So we just have to reclaim, basically go back to the essence,
Yeah, and I think, though, I know what you feel about this, but let's say that as well, because when you were talking about speaking up and stopping, if you see something that's like somebody throwing trash on the street, do you do something about it? What you mean by that as well, though, is to do something about it non-aggressively also, right?
Absolutely.
Because otherwise you're not also upholding the beauty and goodness. No, because in my mind, I was like, okay, you're going to throw trash on my street, I'm going to go throw trash on your street.
No, no, that's not what I mean. And just saying it kindly, like, did you drop this? Did you mean to drop this? Or this
So
fell
what
from you.
yeah, what if I tell you, yes, I meant to drop it?
Then, I mean, there's a certain level, you're just trying to wear awareness. You're not the, you know, the trash police. You're just trying, like, I've tried it many times. And
yeah, I've seen you do that actually very well.
Yeah, and people are always very nice when, I mean, we're prone to react in the same way that we've been acted upon. If, you know, if we're treated unfairly, then we have a bigger chance of acting unfairly. But if you speak to people kindly and nicely, and um, I've once had a whole conversation with people in a car next to me in a parking, or I was stuck in traffic on the ring road, and they threw a whole bunch of trash, and it was just a discussion of like, what kind of country do you envision to live in? And it was a very nice and interesting conversation. And the young man eventually just got out of the car and picked up the trash without me asking him. So of course I've been lucky in that sense. But it also comes with, probably I'm older, he's younger. I mean, I'm a woman. I mean, there's other elements to it, but it's just the intention that we put into it, you know, where we're not out to police people, but we're out to try to find a shared common ground that is pleasant. So
nice, very nice. So as we're coming towards the end of this episode, what are some maybe final remarks or something that we want to talk about?
I think we need to maybe just speak a little bit about like what we mean by beauty and the importance of beauty, because beauty is not something that sounds like, if you Google beauty, all you'll hear, like you'll see online, are cosmetics and probably plastic surgery, and maybe, you know, if you're lucky, some designer handbags. I don't know. Like, but what I'm talking about is beauty in a whole different sense. The beauty that is not necessarily something that is a collector's item. It's, you know, the beauty that is abound. And I feel like if we take it seriously and try to surround ourselves with beautiful things and beautiful people, and even at the, you know, the smallest level, like all the art I have behind me here is by people that like maybe I know, or things that were not expensive that I needed to buy, you know, that I did buy, but I paid very little to. It's about the mug that you hold to, you know, drink your water or tea or whatever it is. And as a matter of fact, has a crack, and I glued it back together, and I cherish this crack. It's okay. It's part of the history of this cup, and I'm not going to throw it just because it doesn't fit perfectly with all the others. Taking that to a deeper sense, even with human beings, you know, there's no one standard of what a human being is, you know, in terms of looks, or as long as they are human beings, they deserve, you know, our ihsan. So I think by thinking about ihsan in that sense of making your surroundings beautifully, making your speech, you know, beautiful, and when you incorporate that, and I know it's difficult because many people live in conditions where even those simple things like a broken mug is not accessible, and I understand that, but I'm also talking to the people that can have that, and to appreciate the beauty in, obviously, nature. Just take the time and look at the sunset, and maybe even the sunrise, which is fabulous. May you never like slice a lemon without looking at how beautiful, you know, those shapes are, or open a pomegranate, or even cut up an onion, and just how meticulous, you know, the layers of the onions are. There's just so much beauty around us. Or looking at the seeds on the outside of a strawberry or inside a cucumber. Like, there's so much, planting a small seed and seeing it sprout. There's a lot of beauty that once we become in tune with that, and once we surround ourselves with that, then we start being able to produce more of it and to receive more of it. The difficult thing, though, is that, and I have to say that I spoke about the mandate, you know, for in the Quran for ihsan in general, but when you look at the specific cases where ihsan is mandated in the Quran, of course, there's a general, you know, appeal and mandate and command and order that people have to show ihsan, but then there's also context that the Quran presents that ihsan is clearly mandated. And guess what? They're not like when everything is going well and we have some extra, coins that we give out to somebody in need, like we often understand ihsan. It's actually putting forth beauty and goodness when you are most prone to act in a different way. Like at times of conflict, idfa billati hiya ahsan. The Quran repeatedly says you push back with beauty and goodness. Ihsan is not mandated at a time when parents are taking care of their children, because in general, parents, derive joy from, seeing their kids happy. Ihsan is mandated 17 times when adults are taking care of their older parents. And we all know how difficult that is to deal with an older parents in terms of physical frailty, mental frailty. It's a hard time. This is when ihsan is mandated. It's not mandated when you enter into a marriage, because that has mawadda and rahma, like this love and compassion that's supposed to guard a marriage. Even though we all know that in many cases that's not necessarily how the marriages operate, but that's the ideal. The Quran mandates ihsan at time of divorce, when times where you feel like maybe you failed and like this person has become an enemy. That's when you treat them with ihsan. So ihsan is a very, very morally obligating type of thought and act that requires a lot of, exercising your moral muscle, and to get that sense of moral agency. It doesn't come, it might come naturally for some people, but for most of us, it's not something that is natural, and we have to stop and pause and think about it. And I think that if we start really giving beauty as a holistic concept the attention it deserves, and this is coming from within, at least I'm, Egyptian and I'm Muslim, so it's coming from within my tradition. If you look at Islamic art, if you look at the beautiful architecture that we've inherited, in so many different locations, and you look at the what's now in museums, in terms of whether it's pottery or carpets or lanterns, there's so much beauty in there. But today we live in an age where if you speak of beauty, it's almost like it's trivialized. And I think this is problematic. We need to kind of gain greater ground when openly and firmly speak about and refuse to accept the Google, definition of what beauty is.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Yes, thank you so much. I love everything you just said. And yeah, absolutely. Practicing ihsan when we're less likely to, or when it's hardest for us to, that is the true test. And I love how I could see those, the onion and the lemon, and when you described them. And they also made me realize, if you're absolutely right, if we take the time to appreciate just that onion or the inside of that lemon, and if you can imagine the human being, every human being is like that as well. They look a certain way from the outside, whatever it is, and then there's so much inside them that is beautiful. And if we can just, right? I mean, if we could just...
love that analogy. I never thought of it, but yes, it's absolutely true.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking when you were, I was seeing the inside of that lemon, and it's so detailed and it's so intricate, and there's so much in there. There's so much beauty,
and like the geometry is unbelievable.
And you can't see that from the outside. And I think that just applies to every human being. The thing is, of course, that along with all the beauty inside every human being is also darkness and, things that they've still haven't worked through, that maybe don't make them behave, in a way that is loving. But the point is, the beauty is there. So I just thought I'll share that that image I had in my mind. So if we could appreciate nature, and if we can appreciate, the lemon and the onion, then we can also come to appreciate each other. I still think there's hope. Sometimes, to be honest, I do sometimes lose hope, but that's only when I'm attached to the outcomes. But when I'm just only attached to my thoughts and my actions, and holding on to hope and faith that we can together create a better world, then I feel better. And with conversations like these today, I definitely feel better, because there are so many people around who, as you said, they care about ethical values. They care about things, even if they're currently caring about them in what we think is the opposite way, but it's because still they're caring about them, right? So people do care to be fair. They do care to be just. Maybe what's missing is for them to care equally about all people. And that's something that we can just keep talking about, because, you know, we're all here and we're all beautiful. So if we can just make sure that we don't cross those lines or start thinking that somebody is less worthy than another, then I think we're on the right path.
And I think this is like something that, you know, real faith, like deep faith, allows us, you know, regardless of what faith it is, it's all one God. And just this idea of, you know, appreciating the beauty that God has created in all of us, and the human strife that we will always be struggling internally before we struggle externally, and that we just have to constantly try to, you know, be aware of those dark sides and just try to continuously shine the light as much as possible.
Yes. Thank you so much, Amira. This was wonderful. And yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure that our audience will as well. And guys, if you do like this episode, please share it, like, share, rate, subscribe, whatever, wherever you're listening or watching. This is available on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many of your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Join me every other Thursday for a new one. Happiness for Humanity is available on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms. If you found this episode valuable, please share it. Let's come together for a happier world.